I'm so used to giving presentations on Zoom these days that I still have my slides. Just now, this time it's to prompt me to remember what I want to say in what sequence. It's an interesting topic to talk about this evening because I never have before. I think it's because, I mean, I always speak about mysticism and those types of subjects because those were always so mysterious to me that that's where my study was. But I am, in my profession, a scientist, a computer scientist. So for me, the fact that science would have an equal place in one's life to religion was sort of a little bit self-evident. I mean, just seemed contradictory to me if those two were ever in true opposition. So you will forgive me if this is my first attempt at conveying some ideas that I think I know viscerally more than I know intellectually. And also, I'm in the room here with Arta, our resident expert on this, presenting on this subject. I've myself been at his science and religion presentations. Um, but yeah, to me, it's a very profound concept, and it's just one concept out of several that the Baha'i faith espouses as being intrinsic to the nature of human development. The Baha'i faith, which is a faith now about 180 years old, brought the idea that all mankind should be united, that we should be one family, and that not only should we agree with one another, but many aspects of our lives that traditionally or in the past have been in contention or at war should also be resolved. That there should be harmony in a lot of different ways between the nations, between the sexes, between science and religion, between the rich and the poor. This is a vision of the world in which we represent a human family and that we're all united. And so the fact that this unity kind of brings into harmony a sort of an age-old antagonism, if you will, to me is very special and very powerful. Because it used to be the case sometimes that if you were really a scientist, you would naturally incline towards atheism. Or if you were really a religionist, you would naturally incline away from earthbound types of studies. But they don't have to be one or the other. Now, in fact, and I'm going to conclude my talk with an idea, I'm going to present the idea that perhaps even science is the joining link between the material and the spiritual. So that's my little summary of the Baha'i faith. And also, please bring up questions. That really kind of helps me too, if you prompt me with things to respond to. So this little graph here, just to give you some historical context on where we are in this discussion, it's very tiny. I'm sorry, I don't have a giant screen to project it on, but you can see that it's like flat, this red line, and then it just starts going up like a mountain, and it goes almost stratospheric at the end. This is the number of patents registered in the United States since the 1790s until the present day. So you can just see in this concrete sense what human development has been doing in the last 200 years. We were almost flat for like 60 years as far as the data that they have available. And then something happened, and then all of a sudden it started going up, and it's just been exponentially increasing. It is not slowing down. In fact, it's like, I think it's more than doubling every single decade. And it's just, you can call it coincidence or not, but right here, this is where the Baha'i faith started in history. So we're sort of at the same time frame as this renovation of thought, of this resurgence of scientific and intellectual exploration. So it's interesting to me that the faith comes to bring a new conception of humanity and a new idea of spirituality at the same time that humankind is really starting to discover more and more potential in the physical world. And through that technology, improving our lives and advancing society. So much so that we're doing things that are normal to us today that would be unheard of. We went to the Railroad Museum in Old Town, Sacramento, and one thing they were pointing out is that until they joined that railroad that went through the mountain there, your journey to get to California was like 4 months minimum. And that was because we had the canal and we had ships. Back in the old days, like a couple hundred years ago, your kids would be the ones that would get to the destination. And now I have Zoom meetings. I had one this morning with a woman who was in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So that was my meeting with her. And it was as if we were in the same room. There was no lag, no stuttering at any kind. So that's the difference in reality that we've experienced physically, intellectually, technologically. And I believe that we are on the cusp of a change of that magnitude spiritually in our relations with each other and in the relations that we have across the whole planet. So, what is science? I mean, we really have to kind of define some terms. That's something a scientist would do to have this discussion. I'm going to present a very basic idea of science to just begin with. And that is science, it comes from the Latin word scire, S-C-I-R-E. And scire means to know. So if you look at the way that the word is formed, science, it literally means knowing. It is a condition of now knowing something. And how do we know things about our reality? We observe, we look for things that repeat, we find patterns in those repetitions, and we discover principles that explain the pattern. So if I observe something and I realize, oh, hey, if I hit my wife on the head, she's going to hit me back, and that's repeatable, like that becomes part of my knowledge base. And now I can make use of that fact if I ever want to be struck.
Is that why you wanted to sit here?
Yeah. But this is basically how we proceed with making use of our material universe, is that we look at the world, we see what things happen, we try to find out, well, what things will happen again? And then can I use the knowledge I've gained through that observation to make use of that fact? And this is how human beings then harness our material world. And then we go deeper than that, though. We don't just look for, oh, if I hit it, something will happen. We also try and find out, well, what's the pattern? What's the underlying fabric that explains why these things are occurring? And can we discover a unifying principle? And really, that's been the pursuit of physicists for so many years now. Can they find one principle, one underlying fundamental truth that the implications thereof explain all the different aspects of reality? So, for example, for the longest time, we had many different forces that we knew about, again, through observation and repetition. We had the electrical force, the magnetic force. At the atomic level, we had strong and weak nuclear forces, and we have a gravitational force. And over time, through experimentation and also experimentation with principle and applying different principles to construct new experiments, we found out that electrical and magnetic are two sides of the same coin. They're actually different aspects of a common force. So nowadays we call it the electromagnetic force. And then we found that the strong and the weak nuclear forces are themselves part of another force. In fact, all of these have now been united except for gravity. We still don't have gravity as part of our unified understanding of the underlying forces of our natural world. But this is what we're doing. That's what scientists are doing. They're looking for those principles because when we have the principle, it will tell us the other implications of that principle that we may not have discovered yet. I don't know if you're familiar in school if you study the periodic table of elements. I actually loved that. I memorized that when I was in high school. But most of that table existed before we found the elements in it, because there was a scientist named Mendeleev who discovered a principle that allowed him to theorize that there would be elements at various positions in that table. And so he constructed the whole table where there were like 80 elements that we just hadn't found, but he had the placeholders for them. And then over the decades, one by one, we kept finding all of those pieces in his table. That's the power of the intellect being applied to observation to discern principle. Then the principle turns around and it produces implications and outcomes that now you can use to power your observation. So science is a very powerful mechanism like this. But what do we actually know about our reality? We've been for now thousands of years doing all of this observing and discovering patterns and finding principles. I've used this picture before, but I really love it because I think this really gives a good depiction of our reality. Here we are in this natural physical world of ours where we have lots of things to see and lots of things to observe. But what religion brings into the picture is the idea that what you can see and observe may not be all that there is. Your reality may be greater than the physical reality that you experience or you see in the mirror. And that, in fact, this part of reality may also have its own patterns and principles. And some of those principles may conduce to our health and happiness, but they're not of a physical sort. They're harder to observe, they're harder to get a handle on. And so the religionist view is that there are beings, individuals who are sent by God, and they come to this earth and they give us clues as to those aspects of our nature, this deeper side of the iceberg that we don't see. To say that if we act with compassion, if we forgive, if we love, we will train ourselves in capacities that will serve us even beyond the death of our physical body. Like that's one of the fundamental key messages of religion. That's not incompatible with science observing and making use of what's on the top here. It's just saying that there's more. And in fact, science has never said this doesn't exist, right? It just says, this is what I see. This is what I know. This is what I can make use of. And religion is saying, this is what I know, and this is what you can make use of if you apply that knowledge. So these two sides are the ones that should be in harmony. And that makes a whole life. Oh, sorry, viewers. This is a picture of, this is a picture of an iceberg. Very big iceberg. This doesn't show very well on this camera. Sorry, viewers. Okay, so all of this has set humanity on this quest for truth. Like we're all, whether you're a religionist, a scientist, or neither of those things, we're all in some ways looking for truth, looking for things that are real, looking for things that we can base the decisions of our life on. And it's interesting how certain aspects of this quest for truth have become very popular. Like this is a Spock. I have a picture of Spock on the screen, and he's in a TV show. I don't know if there is anybody here who doesn't know what Star Trek is, but he's part of a race of beings that have founded their entire society and philosophy on a devotion to logic. They wish to extirpate from their behavior and their thinking all emotion, all irrational things. They only want to think about logic. They only want to apply logic. And there is a certain beauty to it. You know, it makes for a very interesting character too. And I know I've met people and knew people in college that they also fell in love with logic because logic is so appealing. It makes so much sense. There's so much clarity and simplicity to it. But what's interesting about logic is that logic and mathematical truths, they feel like there's something absolute. They feel like there's something eternal that we've discovered, like that we've plumbed out of the mystery of creation, and now we have access to it. But in fact, logic and mathematics are entirely human inventions. They are self-defining. And in fact, I'll give you a little example of this, which is this famous equation, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So I've been in I've heard many presentations where 1 plus 1 equals 2 is presented as if it is one of the quintessential fundamental truths of reality, right? But this is not a quintessential truth of reality. This is actually simply a statement of definition. So in my field, in computer science, one of the things that we use to study statements of truth is formal logic, going back to Spock. This, I won't explain the whole thing, but this is the proof that 1 plus 1 equals 2, the whole thing. And every step of this proof is a reference to definition. So 1 plus 1 equals 2 because of the definition of 1, the definition of 2, and the definition of plus, and nothing else. Like there's no external element. There's no external thing being referenced here. It is a self-contained universe that makes its own sense. That is what human logic is. And there are many forms of logic, actually. There's classical logic and there's constructive logic. To give you an example of the difference between those two, because they actually relate to my field, if I had a bag, like let's say I have a little bag here, and I told you that either it's true that there is a blue marble in this bag or there is not a blue marble in this bag. Would you accept that as a true statement? If you would accept that as a true statement, you are a classical logician. A constructive logician would not accept that statement. If it is only true that there is a blue marble in this bag, if I take the blue marble out and I show it to you, It is only true that there is not a blue marble in this bag if I take every single thing out of this bag and show it to you and show you that the bag is empty. It is constructive, meaning I actually have to hand you the witness to the truth of the statement. It is not acceptable for a thing to be true merely because the statement makes logical sense. And that's actually upending a lot of mathematics today, this distinction between constructive and classical truth.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
And not to go too far into the weeds with this, but we have the ability to discern a singular something versus more than one. So we have some sense of one from reality, which isn't a definition, right?
We map our concept of one onto what we observe. Like physical laws, for example, there are no physical laws. There are just consistent observations. Every observation we've made of the universe that we call a physical law simply means we've never observed a contradiction to it. So we call it a law, we empower it in our mind with the concept of a law like gravity, but we don't know that gravity holds everywhere. We've just never observed it not to hold.
Well, I'm not even talking about a law. I'm just talking about we have a definition in reality of what singular is versus plural. Because we experience, even if I'm a whale, I know if there's another whale there or if there's more than one.
Right.
And I'm not mapping anything in language, I'm not representing it with a number, but I have an experience of one. I know I have a discernment of something. We don't have to call it, but there's a difference there.
Right.
So that's where my mind went in terms of there is some reality to the idea of one.
We could go deeper into that. You're getting into the realm of semantics, which is how you map symbols to different domains of truth. Because there are definitions of reality where there aren't two whales. The two whales are part of a united ecosystem in which they share atoms, they share fluids. There's another view of reality in which they are two whales separate from each other. Like, depending on which slice you take, you can reach definitions of oneness and two-ness that vary. And semantics is the field of mapping concepts into different realities. So like if I had a book somewhere.
It's not just the word you say when people are arguing and while you're honest.
Right. So is this a book? This is a book in the context of its current use. It is also a fire starter. It is also a doorstop. It is also a thing to hit people with. And in every context in which I can make that statement, it's true in that context. Yeah. Yeah. I even read once in a book on Zen philosophy that like an umbrella is rain, because an umbrella does not exist without the concept of rain also existing. And so in a sense, it's as reflective as of the greater concept of rain as the drops that come out of the cloud also.
Enough said. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Is there a blue marble?
So since you are now a constructivist, there is a fidget spinner and there is nothing else. So I can now make the true statement that there is no blue marble in this bag. Yeah. Yeah, that law actually is called the law of the excluded middle, that the P or not P. So what the Baha'i faith says about the harmony of science and religion, and this is from Abdul Baha, it says that religion and science are the two wings on which man's intelligence can soar into the heights, with which the human soul can progress. It is not possible to fly with one wing alone. Should a man try to fly with the wing of religion alone, he would quickly fall into the quagmire of superstition, whilst, on the other hand, with the wing of science alone, he would also make no progress, but fall into the despairing slough of materialism. Slough?
A slough. That's, you know what a slough is?
It's a place where the water goes.
It's like the side of a river that's all marshy and the water slows way down. It's kind of, you can get lost in it.
Okay. Yeah, we used to live near a slough called Sal Si Puedes. Leave if you can. And then here's another quote from Abdul Baha as well. If religious beliefs and opinions are found contrary to the standards of science, They are mere superstitions and imaginations. For the antithesis of knowledge is ignorance, and the child of ignorance is superstition. Unquestionably, there must be agreement between the religion and science. If a question be found contrary to reason, faith and belief in it are impossible, and there is no outcome but wavering and vacillation. So that kind of, I brought those two quotes out because they kind of solidify what the Baha'i position on this idea of the harmony of science and religion are. But why is it a novel idea? Like, here I am presenting on this subject, and I don't think anyone here finds it wholly unreasonable, but why would it be novel enough to be worth a presentation? And that's because we have this age-old antagonism between science and religion. And this is a quote from also Abdu'l-Baha, where he explains that between scientists and the followers of religion, there has always been controversy and strife, for the reason that the latter have proclaimed religion superior in authority to science, and considered scientific announcement opposed to the teachings of religion. Baha'u'llah declared that religion is in complete harmony with science and reason. And when I looked at history, I found an interesting phenomenon that occurs. So I can't really use the terms conservative and progressive because they're so politically charged, but there is a tendency in human beings, and it happens also with expansion and consolidation, to have one phase of growth where you change a lot and you go into new things and you explore and you just renovate. And then you have another phase of life where you consolidate and you study and you stick to what you have and you improve. And these two things come in cycles. Like, one is often more typical of youth, one is often more typical of mature age, but they're not really specific to those times of life. In a certain individual's life, both could happen. And what you find in both science and religion is that this cycle goes on and on. Now, it is, of course, convenient for scientists to present scientific history as if it has been a stair-step of progress towards a better and better understanding of reality, but that's not actually how science has progressed. Science has progressed in fits and starts as much as any other field of human endeavor. During the time right before Maxwell came out with his equations unifying the electric force and the magnetic force, there were all kinds of political arguments over which system explained reality better. And the people who were better known, who had more money, who had more political position, their theories held dominance over people who objected to them and said, no, that can't be the description of reality because it just doesn't make any sense. And so they silenced those voices and they shut them down. And it took an upheaval in the scientific world in order for what Maxwell brought to truth to finally be accepted and recognized. It happened to Einstein as well. Nobody accepted his theories of relativity until the prediction he made about the solar eclipse actually happened, and people took notice. So science has done this a lot. It has had the established orthodoxy that solidifies a certain view and opinion about reality. It has the upstarts who want to challenge that view. People fight them. They try to silence them. So that all happens there in science, and it happens in religion. If you look at history, religion, every time a new religion comes on the planet, it is the most progressive force you have ever seen, right? It destroys every tradition, every known truth. It breaks up families. It breaks up societies. The manifestations will go into the holy places and smash the idols that the people have been worshiping for centuries. I mean, it is just so absolutely destructive to the status quo. But over hundreds and hundreds of years, as that religion matures and develops, it actually becomes the strongest holder of the status quo of all systems of thought and behavior. And so religion has these sort of like 1,000-year time cycles of being the most innovative to being the most restrictive of innovation. Science is doing the same thing. It's the only difference is that the time scales are shorter for science. Science is doing it every few decades. Religion is doing it every few millennia. If you look at the teachings of each manifestation of God, each messenger of God at the beginning of their religion, they never discount science. They never speak out against science. Who are they always speaking out against? The religious doctors of the former religion. So it's only later that religion and science come into conflict because while religion is solidifying, science is continuing to go through these periods of upstart and advance. And it reaches a point where some of the interpretations or the observations of science begin to bring into question the beliefs and the understandings of Scripture. And that's where you get into the conflict between the two. And that's where the authority of God gets brought into the picture. And of course, God is right. And so scripture must be right and science has to be wrong. And so Abdul Baha is moving us away from that pattern of science interacting with religion by actually clearly stating that truth must be susceptible to science and reason. Otherwise, it's just hard to have faith about it. I mean, you have to kind of have that faith against your better judgment if you're going to keep
Do you think
to such a
science
truth.
is currently on progression?
Oh, in some areas, I would say that it is. And then some areas, I mean, there's like people hold the string theory very tightly because it's just been out there and been studied for so long. There's so much investment in it, and there's a sunk cost fallacy. But there are renovations of it being studied. There are kind of radical. In fact, every once in a while, someone will point me to a whole website of a guy who has an absolutely radical theory on the way everything is built, and you've never heard of this guy, and you've never seen his writings or anything. And he's like, and this is why this happens, and this is why this happens, and it's just not part of the main. It's not part of the main body of literature. And who knows? Who knows if he's right? Who knows if he's someday going to become the next Einstein? I've seen many such people, and so they're kind of viewed as quacks from the current scientific establishment, but who knows? We really don't understand so much about our universe. In fact, in computing, you all use hard drives. I mean, now we use SSDs and NVRAM devices, but in the days when we had spinning platters of disks, they had like 10 gigabyte, 20 gigabyte. This was in the late 1990s. And there was actually a challenge from IBM to get down to an areal density of 1 gigabyte per square inch because nobody was able to achieve that. And it seemed beyond the bounds of physical science because there was only so small you could shrink the head of the magnetic reader before it actually started having quantum tunneling effects that would influence the electrons and change the data being read from the drive. Like that's the level of reality at which we were working with those hard drives. And then in an unrelated field, some guy who was just studying material science was sandwiching different metals and plastics together for a completely different application. And he discovered a principle that could be used when this device was put in between a magnetic reader and a medium. You could read magnetically by inference. Like you could infer the state of an electron without direct interaction. That invention, when he discovered it and realized the implication, got transferred back to the people who were making hard drives. And within 2 years' time, we went from a 20 gigabyte maximum to 100 to 200 to now. I mean, the biggest hard drive I can buy right now is 20 terabytes. So there was a day when 1 gigabyte per square inch was thought beyond the bounds of physical law. And then what happened? We discovered a new physical law, like something we didn't even know was an aspect of our reality. So that's what happens in science. And often happens by chance too. People discover these things and they don't even mean to be discovering it. Like the guy who found Teflon, he was not even trying to find Teflon. That was an accident in the laboratory. There are so many stories like that. So the reason I think that science and religion do get into this tango isn't just only because of this shift between innovation and renovation. It also has to do with materialism. Because science in itself is simply the acquisition of knowledge through applying our faculties and powers of observation and our mind, applying our ability to observe and our intellect's ability to reflect on what we observe. That's science. When you add materialism, it adds on this philosophical idea that the only reality that is the reality that can be observed. That is a statement that materialism makes, not that science makes. So the materialistic philosopher says the only truth is the truth that science gives you access to. And that truth says there is no God, there is no other part of the iceberg. And therefore religion must be wrong, and therefore there is no God. And when it makes that much of a statement about religion as it does, well, I mean, any religion takes an issue with that. And that kind of feeds into this antagonism. And so for the last like 200 years, now that science has been doing so well, developing our society and developing our technology so capably, the materialism has been so seeping into it deeper and deeper, almost invisibly so, because of how much success we've had applying science to the material world. And that has given it more truth than it deserves. And that truth has put it in direct opposition with religious truth and religious inquiry. Whereas the Baha'i faith's point of view is that science need not be materialistic. And if you don't use science materially, in terms of materialistic philosophy, and you just apply science as a tool of the human intellect, that it becomes the greatest lens, the greatest light upon which to shine the mysteries, to shine upon the mysteries of nature. So this is a statement from the Catholic Answers Encyclopedia. This is their definition of materialism. Materialism is a philosophical system which regards matter as the only reality in the world, which undertakes to explain every event in the universe as resulting from the conditions and activity of matter, and which thus denies the existence of God and the soul. Anything that is not material, cannot be real, cannot exist. That is what materialism tells us. So science, this is kind of where I wanted to end with. I gave you that more simple definition of science for a reason, as a tool of the intellect, because I actually think that science is the place where science and religion intersect. Because here's religion concerning the whole of our reality, lots of aspects of our being that we're not aware of. And then here's science giving us this ability to shine light on the world and everything that we see. The joining point between our reality and our exploration of physical reality is the mind. The intellect is where the observation happens, the recognition of repetition, the establishing of patterns, and the discovery of principles. It happens in the intellect. Well, Abdu'l-Baha had some very interesting things to say about the intellect. He said that all the powers and attributes of man are human and hereditary in origin. They come from our being as human beings, just growing up in this world. Outcomes of nature's processes, except the intellect, which is supernatural. The intellect is our supernatural component. Again, he says, we have already stated that science, or the attribute of scientific penetration, is supernatural, and that all our other blessings of God are within the boundary of nature. So this ability of ours to make use of a force, a capacity that is just simply not material. He's saying here that our intellect is not material. And it is interesting that it's unique to us among all other beings that we encounter on this planet. And what do we put that intellect to use to do? To observe and understand reality. And when you do that, you're harnessing science as a way to extend your capacity. And you're learning about God, right? Because if it's all one truth, if it's all one reality, the patterns that you're observing are reflective of deeper harmonies, deeper patterns, deeper realities. So that is everything I had for you in my slides.
To seek proof that the world is materialistic. It's a part of materialistic philosophy.
You do that. I'll read your book. Yes.
Science, I believe science says that there's many, like a whole world of frequencies and hertz that we can't hear or see. That's all around us.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe there's something there.
I would believe that there are a near infinite number of things that we're not yet aware of.
From one to two, human beings, people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, even though I am a scientist and I use science in my work every day, I just don't discount any theory about what could be, because we've already learned so many things that 50 years ago we wouldn't even have believed they could exist. And now they're an everyday part of our reality. So yeah, harmonies. I mean, that's another area I've seen. I won't call it fringe science, but science that's not currently accepted as part of mainstream. A lot of them I've read have to do with this concept of harmonies and energies that relate to harmonies. So I think that there are other people out there who have keyed into some truths there, and I think you're right.
Yeah, that really interests me, because we only see a really small, what's it called, the visible
Spectrum
of light.
Yeah.
We can't see like gamma rays or X-rays or microwaves.
Right.
What if there's
They're
like all
going
types
through
of
you right now.
light?
Right.
There's just stuff we can't see here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We only see like a fraction of a percent of the actual world we are in.
Yeah, it's like the ocean.
But we have intellect. We have the intellect to build instruments that will show us the infrared and everything. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. We can expand our vision through the application of intellect and the use of science. Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned the material philosophy. What someone who believes in that practice or that philosophy, how do they explain things like altruism, compassion, things like that? They're not logical things. So
I mean, when I went to college, those were all the big debates: nature versus nurture, altruism versus self-seeking behavior that just had a larger objective. I mean, I don't know. I think it's hard to come to any final conclusion on those questions because if you're just dealing with
People who are like, who believe in evolution will explain that not just individual organisms evolve, but the species as, a culture of species will also evolve. So altruism, where if you are being altruistic, you're not going to pass on your genes, but your kin who also have similar genes to you now have a greater chance of passing on their genes because you were altruistic to help them. And
Right.
so that gene will still get passed on. So you can still kind of explain some of those things scientifically, I think.
yeah, that's the self-interest on a larger time scale that I meant. Greta?
I was reflecting on in Baha'i circles, we often use the word materialism to represent something that may be materialism according to this philosophy, or it could be capitalism.
Uh-huh.
So it's interesting. So we were just talking about materialistic philosophy with self-focus is what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And then if you have materialism with capitalism, I think they've become so intertwined in our culture. So when the youth are talking about materialism, they're kind of talking about a focus on things,
Mhm.
which is materialistic, but there's also like a heavy, there's a heavy cultural weight on money.
Mhm.
And I find that very interesting to focus on it. And just by way of example, I remember working for a company and observing that if a woman needed time off because she was having menstrual cramps or her kid was sick and needed to be picked up from school, everybody like, oh God, okay, whatever. Like they put up. But if a guy had to miss work because he had a big deal going on with this cell or he's like starting a company, everybody's like, oh yeah, you do it, man. Like, go, good for you. They just like celebrate for them.
Right.
And it just shocked me. It's like there was such a bias in what you get time for. Self-care, forget about it.
Mhm.
Family care, forget about it. But making money, that's kind of where it's at.
Right.
So I don't know if you have any comments about that, but I think it's a great thing to think about that there are different things. Because can we think of a culture? Can we think of something that's is there a culture that's like very materialist but not very capitalist? And I don't mean capitalist in the sense of your political structure. I mean
the focus
money,
on obtaining things.
Money and things being it's kind of like how we've been locked into survival.
Yeah.
Right, as a species. And we're trying to come out of that now. We're trying to come into a more reciprocal way of being where we actually take care of each other. So it's not like this dog-eat-dog competition for our survival.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Materialism.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard it like denying God, denying that. So I was just thinking about in the writings when it says the United States has spread their materialism to the whole world, and that's one of the problems. I mean, what's worse? You're focused on, getting things or not believing in God and something more. I mean, what is the greater effect? I don't, I never thought about it before.
Mhm,
But
mhm. Yeah, well, when I was very much younger, I grew up in Christian church, but then I became atheist when I was like 14. And so for to me, that's like being a materialist in respect to religious truth. I reduced the scope of my reality to only what I was willing to believe in. But then later, I became an agnostic by the time I was in college because I was like, how can I assert the non-existence of something I've never observed to be true or not true? Yeah, exactly. I mean, from a constructivist point of view, I can make no statement about God because he is neither observable nor demonstrably unobservable. And so that shift from atheism to agnosticism to me was a shift away from materialism to simply an acknowledgement that I don't know. And then you bring capitalism into it, which is interesting because that's kind of where the intellect links up with materialism because money only exists up here, right? Money becomes a proxy for the world and all the resources it contains. And so it gives me a handle on how to think about my possession of the world around me. But I think it adds more to what just plain materialism is, which is just, you could have a society where all people do is hunting and gathering and nothing else. But you actually don't observe that among primitive tribes. They have a spirituality, they have systems of art, they have a lot more that goes on in their reality than just the animal side of their existence. But a true materialist would be, okay, there's only the animal side of my existence. And technology just lets me live as a really awesome animal. Well, except when my iPhone doesn't.
There are people that they value values, even though they would think that they're materialists.
Mm-hmm. You mean people who don't believe in God, who only believe in physical reality?
They believe values are important.
Thank you.
Virtues.
I'm glad you bring that up because that was the slide that I skipped. I actually did want to say something about that.
Yes, I think that's called secular humanism.
Yeah, the power of symbols. So, why are logic and mathematical truths like 1 + 1 = 2, why do they feel so good, right? You watch an episode of Star Trek and you see Spock on planet Vulcan, like in his little chamber doing his logical puzzles and stuff like that. And it just feels so reverential. It feels so powerful. And I think the reason why, this is my own personal supposition, is because logic and mathematical truth have the feeling of things that are absolute and eternal, yet they dwell fully within the human sphere. It gives us a way to access something that feels like it's infinite from a finite standpoint. And this is what Jung identified as the power of symbols. Symbols are powerful because they are readily cognizable to the intellect. Like you see a Christian wearing a cross, you know what a cross is. A cross is a very easy concept to understand. So the mind can interface with that cross very easily. But it refers to a reality that you cannot perceive or understand, and you never will. But your unconscious can vibe with that non-observable reality. And so what ends up happening is that the cross, being this religious symbol, becomes the joining point between the conscious mind's desire to get a handle on something and the unconscious's desire to be let free, to revere, to have a powerful, devoted attitude towards something. And so, in a way, logic and mathematical truth, they do that for people too. And there can be materialists. And what I think you will find is that God exists in that materialist's life. It just has a different name. It's just a yearning. Whatever else, the spirit yearns. And the spirit will identify the absolute in ways that it can relate to. Even if sometimes those definitions are not the real absolute, they're self-referential, but it has that flavor, because that's what the soul wants. It wants to go back to experiencing the eternal. So thank you. Well, thank you everybody for coming this evening.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you.